Beardy and the Beast Media Club.
Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. This is placeholder intro song.
Thank you for joining us at Beauty and the Beast Media Club. Today we are talking about Darren Aronofsky's film Requiem for a Dream. This is based off a novel of the same name by Herbert Shelby Jr. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, Drew.
Hey.
Please be sure to like, follow, all of that stuff on your platform of choice. Full list can be found at beardyandthebeast.com. Spoilers will not be cut off here, unlike some gangrenous arms. So, Drew, dream or nightmare?
uh, the only way I can answer this isn't representative of my finger quotation enjoyment of the film. I would say nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, the film itself is set up to be extremely negative.
Mm,
So for a direct answer to that question, it would definitely be nightmare.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a requiem for a dream too, right? So, I mean, requiems generally aren't the good things.
Mm.
Like it's the idea of remembering the dreams that you had, not necessarily obtaining said dreams.
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
The I'd like to think that how highly rated and discussed this movie is, I'd probably have like fully agreed across the board if I was at a simply just a different phase in my life.
Yeah.
Like if it hit me in my early 20s or my late teens, because I hadn't seen the movie up until now, and the movie's what, like 25 years old, 20 23 or something
22,
like
I
that.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah, 2000.
a weird headspace. The things that it was discussing, the things like falling into like addiction and trying to obtain desires. I think it was able to illustrate these things well,
Mhm.
but in such an uncomfortable way.
Yeah.
At least for me, I I was deeply uncomfortable for like the majority of the film, and it was all emotional.
Mhm.
Like everything about it just had me on the edge of my seat, not in that like thriller, frightened, or that exciting. I'm propped up, but more in the like I want to exit or I want to leave. What is currently occurring?
Yeah.
Um, what is happening to me? But I also don't want to
Yeah.
because of the way it's being portrayed. It's just it was interesting to me, and I'm sure we'll kind of discuss that more as we discuss the film itself.
Yeah. It's an interesting point because, like, this is one of my favorite movies. It is also one of the hardest movies for me to watch.
And I fully understand why.
Right? Like, it's definitely a movie that's worth watching, but you're not in for a good time. Which apparently the author's actually known for that. A lot of his books are about that. I had the benefit of owning this on DVD, unlike a lot of the other ones we've watched where we've had to watch on streaming services.
Hmm.
So, first of all, I miss DVDs. I love those bonus contents and just like
Mm.
and stuff like that. I didn't listen to the director's commentary, but I did end up watching something with the author himself. A lot of his motivation, apparently, a lot of the stuff he's known for is exploring the human suffering, and a lot of that comes from his life too. So it's it's a lot of his film or a lot of his books are like that.
I think the film adaptation of it. I haven't read the book, but I assume that it illustrated it well, or at least that feeling. Because I had this feeling while watching the film that it would hit anyone who watched it some personal way.
Mhm.
Like I myself, I'm actually like hyper addictive when it comes to pretty much anything
Yeah,
that is. your sugars. I'm an ex-smoker. Hell, love. Like
Mm.
I go like through physical withdrawals after a relationship ends.
I may remember a situation like that.
So having that explored by a film so directly
Mm.
was like it was very disturbing to me.
Yeah,
I actually had at the end of the film I had a mini depressive episode where I just had to like go for a walk, unwind
yeah,
from watching an hour and 40-minute film.
yeah,
And I wasn't invested in the characters at all.
yeah,
Well, maybe Sarah.
yeah. Well,
The
I
yeah,
think that's an interesting thing with the film. Like, he explored the human condition, so it's not necessarily about a character in general, just about what can happen and that emotional aspect. A big thing both Aronofsky and Selby said. Selby actually did write the screenplay as well for this, so
mm,
they their focus was the emotions of it, not necessarily. I mean, obviously the plot's there as well, but they really wanted to have that emotional resonance, and there's a lot of music choices and cinematography choices in that are done really well. I think that helped drive that home.
it's it kind of draws to light some of the older style filmmaking and directing choices that I kind of miss. That is everything being very particular.
Mhm.
Everything having a purpose, every shot. It's not just, oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
I remember seeing something like the doctor only says the name of the drug to Sarah. Or sorry, the only time you see the doctor's eyes is when he was saying the name of the drug to Sarah.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I feel like those choices may not be made as frequently anymore. But then
Mhm.
again, when you have a film environment that is majority superhero blockbusters,
Yeah.
it probably overshadows films of this nature.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not. I can't even think of a film that over the last 5 years that would hit as as hard as Requiem or even Darko. Like
Mhm.
all these kind of like where in the last 5 years is your American Beauty?
Yeah. No, it's very true. Yeah, I know that a lot of the stuff was very deliberate. Apparently, like, just speaking of the doctors and Sarah, like, the one doctor was actually told, like, the only stage direction he was given apparently was never look at her.
Hmm.
And he's like, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Some of the shots that, I think have become a little more known now with GoPros and such like that. Like the fixed camera on the actor, right?
Hmm. As they
Kind of
move
become,
around and
yeah, like that was like a 40-pound rig that they were wearing
hmm.
when they did that, right? Because there wasn't GoPros, 25 years ago.
Oh, like Connolly, Marion, going into the elevator after seeing the like selling out to the shrink.
Yeah,
Uh, Going into that elevator, like having a rig like that, especially at that angle, would have been very awkward.
yeah. Or, oh, I mean, Marlon Wayne's Tyrone, he ran with that thing.
Gee, yeah. And like, I'm not a weak guy. Like, I'm fairly athletic. I play field sports, and having a 40-pound thing hanging off my front or back while having to run or just move around in a manner that's not awkward would be very difficult.
Yeah, a couple of other cool cinematography things that I'd like to mention here. I really liked how they showed Sarah's,
Descent?
basically while she's on. Well, no, not her descent. This is before her descent. Like her when she was on the uppers,
Hmm.
right? And they had that like 25-second scene of her just manically cleaning her apartment,
I
and apparently that took 40 minutes to film.
hmm.
And they actually had like a robotic camera set up to move once a second, an eighth of an inch. to get that effect. That's dedication.
It gave me kind of seeing Sarah on Upwards is when the whole movie started. I wouldn't say collapsing because that makes you think of the entire film as a whole. I'm thinking when my emotional state that was invested in this movie started collapsing.
Yeah,
Be the best way to say it. And it does come back to all those very particular and selected shot choices.
yeah,
Stuff like shots from the TV's point of view looking down on Sarah
yeah,
as if it was like this thing looming over her.
yeah,
What was some of the other stuff? They always talk about how many cuts are in this movie.
yeah,
How there was like 2000 or some such instead of the 600 700 you'd usually see.
yeah,
And for the most part I actually found that disorientating.
yeah,
However, when it slowed down was when people were actively contemplating not taking, the drug of choice or resisting that
yeah,
temptation, and that's what pulled that style together for me
yeah,
because it made the slowdowns and the speed ups actually have a purpose when it came to what was going on with the characters in the film and how it was how the world and their choices were impacting them at that time,
yeah.
if that
I
makes
mean, other
sense.
things. Oh, sorry.
Oh, if that makes sense.
Oh no, that makes perfect sense. That was actually some of the deliberate choices. So, they call it the hip hop montages, like when they're taking drugs and such like that. Like the only time you don't see that happening is when the character is actively resisting.
Mm,
Another aspect why there's going to be a lot of cuts is they made the deliberate choices to have the characters like they did a split frame, like two completely different shots. They're literally sitting like lying beside each other, sitting beside each other, which kind of shows which from an artistic point of view shows that even though they're together, they're separate, right? But that's going to add to that cut count as well, a good chunk,
mm.
right? And again, all for a purpose.
Yeah, that does really like illustrate the characters themselves and their various, for lack of a better term at this time, descent in the film.
Yeah,
It definitely separates them on a story basis as well, telling you that each one of these is a unique identity,
yeah,
as in uh, Harry and Marion. You're not supposed to view them together. You're supposed
yeah,
to see them as two individuals who are impacted by each other.
yeah,
Just to
yeah,
elaborate more on what I think you're saying.
yeah. And that's exactly it, right? Like they're one of the ways I heard the way they were trying to show the characters and such like that was it's the addictions that are present throughout the film. It's it's more about trying to fill a void
Mm-hmm.
almost, right? So for whatever reason, so you have Sarah is instead of trying to deal with her loneliness, she's giving into TV, and then when she thinks she has the option to be on TV, that just becomes her sole motivating purpose. And she had a couple of fantastic monologues saying that too.
And the different types of addictions that she was experiencing as
Yeah,
well, and just the replacement of one with another. For
yeah,
instance, foods for the ups and downers, watching TV itself for the glamour of being on TV.
yeah. It was the I think that's what they were showing with Marion and Harry. They were split apart because it wasn't about them having a relationship. It was about them filling a void within themselves. So even their relationship was almost like slightly addictive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's another reason why they did those. Had everyone's kind of split like that. There's actually one shot that really caught my eye. It was they were talking in bed, I think, and like sitting up, and you had Jennifer Connelly straight on, and Jared Leto. You just saw his profile. You never actually saw them
Mm.
looking at each other while they were talking. Like it was just such a I don't know. It really caught my eye, and like brought in. Even here, they're still kind of doing that split frame aspect.
I'm wondering what it would be like if while watching this film, you were to watch that scene and cover the side that say had Leto, and
Yeah.
then watch the scene back covering the one that had Connolly,
Mm,
just to see if you have a different perspective based on like what you're seeing there.
yeah.
So you might have to watch like an entire act of the film with that kind of perception in mind.
Yeah.
But they definitely, if we were to think about what Marion was feeling, I guess Harry could be a replacement for a unpresent family, of course, being a hookup for her narcotic addiction, an outlet. It eventually becomes an outlet for motivation for her getting a. I didn't know what the purpose of the store was, the storefront or the. I assume it was a studio.
Yeah.
Studio. They didn't really go into it. They didn't. It's unfortunate when I want to see something spelled out. I just wanted to know what that was because that would, like, if they even put up like Marion's art corner,
Mm.
that would have given me a better idea of what what void was being filled with it.
Mm. Well, allow me to enlighten you
I would
why
like
they
to be
didn't go with it.
enlightened.
So, she was fashion designer, is what
Okay.
she was trying to do, and the reason why they only talk about that near the beginning of the film is you got to remember the first act, the summer act, is for all of the characters involved. Them, it's talking about the dreams that we're having a requiem for.
Mm.
Sarah's dream to be on TV, Marion's dream to have her boutique or studio space, Tyrone and Harry's get rich quick by selling drugs. So that's where a lot of that comes from. I think that's why we don't explore that because they dream to fill the void, but they don't. They only partially work towards it, if even that, and they work towards it in negative ways.
Mm.
Like I remember when they're talking when they get their drugs to start selling, the first thing they do is dive into their drugs,
Yeah,
right? Like, you can see what's going to happen there.
that that makes that can knowing that connects me to Marion a little bit more because
Mm.
I must have missed that it was supposed to be like a fashion studio. I was just
Yeah,
making assumptions while watching the movie,
yeah,
and knowing the particular vice or dream that she had
right.
is enlightening to me. And I guess Tyrone's, I couldn't tell what it was. I knew it was a connection to his mother because they kept having scenes to that,
Yeah,
um, which instantly made him more endearing to me than Harry or Marion. But
that it's really cool to hear, actually.
I only got this like while researching. Apparently, it was discussed after. It might have been by the director, or it might have been in the book that he was trying to fill a void and set himself up with like a home that he didn't have as a child.
Mm.
Is what I understand it to be.
Yeah, so there's a couple things with that. The void that he was trying to fill was love.
Okay.
And there's kind of a few interesting things with this. It's things that I didn't really catch because you don't hear them say their last names in the film, with the exception of Sarah and Harry. His last name's Love,
Mm.
and there was a deleted scene where he actually talks about losing his mother at a young age,
Okay.
right? So there was a deleted scene there around that. Um, Also, word of God. So Selby actually said that of the characters, Tyrone was the only one that he actually saw as redeemable as well. Probably tied to that idea of love and human connection and
Mm. Yeah, because he
things like
was actively searching for something beyond himself, while everyone else had like a selfish ambition.
yeah,
Yeah, I really like Tyrone as a character, and probably talking about it a little bit more later. But like Marlon Wayans just slayed this part. I didn't even know it was him for the longest time, and I'm like, this is the guy that was in like them spoof comedy movies.
This movie came out the same year as Scary Movie.
Jeez. Just killed it.
Yeah.
Just killed it. I love seeing when a comedy actor gets into a more serious role, be it a thriller or something of this nature.
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's face it, most comedians are actually fairly dark inside.
Yeah.
I'm not actually surprised that he was able to pull this off.
Hmm.
That it was within his ability,
Yeah.
I guess you could say, simply because of that fact.
Yeah.
But I guess that brings us to, I guess, the last character. Kind of talk about what they were searching for. They were filling, and that is, of course, Joker himself, Harry Goldfarb. I just saw him as someone who was selfish, looked to himself, was the search or the desire for money.
Mhm.
Like I don't think for a moment that him wanting to buy a TV and some type of recompense or some type of apology towards his mother for repeatedly stealing her TV. Like
Yeah.
I don't think that had anything to do with his mother. I
No,
think that
I,
was just for him.
I
Uh,
agree. Feel like you're
honestly,
doing something right.
yeah, yeah. I
Like,
think him was he didn't want connection. I really feel like he just wanted money and drugs.
yeah, Tim. So I see him as kind of the. I mean, I know there's four intersecting stories, but we you can kind of break it down to two main stories. You have Sarah's story and Harry's story, right?
Mm,
Tyrone and Marion are connected to Harry's story
mm,
very directly. So I think to me, Harry represented the typical view of an addict,
mm,
right? It was very much the I'm abusive when I don't have what I want, and can be sweet when I do have what I want. You see him like right at the beginning of the film. You have he did a trek to sell that TV to get a hit.
yeah.
So I think that's the big thing of it with with him as a character. I think he's supposed to be that complete stereotypical one, whereas you have Sarah being the probably more probably more accurate view of how a lot of people get addicted to things,
Mm, mm.
right? Which I think is possibly why you connected there. I mean, that and Ellen Ellen Burstyn's acting was
Whew.
oh
Oh, oh,
um
it was beautiful. But before we just drop all our accolades
yeah.
at her doorstep, I wanna I wanna complain about Harry some more.
Yeah. No, no, of course.
uh, I mean, Jared Leto did a great job portraying an addict. I thought I definitely thought he was. Apparently, he like dropped something like 25, 30 pounds for the film. Hung out with actual junkies. Was shooting up water.
Yep.
But was doing the physical actions to get into the role, and it's I call it he was my Joffrey,
Mm,
someone that they portrayed the character so well that and their character is dislikable
yeah.
that you dislike them in real life. That's that's what I got from the portrayal of Harry Goldfarb. He Joffreyed me.
yeah.
I mean, he was in Lord of War, American Psycho, Dallas Buyers. He's in a band I like. But now I kind of dislike him a little bit. Because he's the junkie that's going to steal my TV. And the thing that hit me right away, that initiated this, just to complain a little bit more, he kept stealing his mom's TV.
Yeah.
He had all sorts of DJ and stereo equipment in his apartment.
Of course.
He could have sold any of that at any time, but he was so incredibly selfish he'd rather steal from his elderly mother
Yeah.
to feel fuel his addiction.
Well, you can't get rid of your own stuff.
I just
Like,
Well,
but
I
then
mean, he
again,
wouldn't be able to get it back.
yeah. I mean, again, that's the again where I think he was supposed to be that stereotypical junkie. And I mean, it says it says wonders to what he's done to have this one role
Mm.
basically color your perspective of him as an actor because he sold it. I
And
do
that,
think there was a couple of points where, there was like there was one kind of redeemable point that I felt where like I actually felt he he was trying to be sincere, and that was right at the end of the film when he's talking to Marion on the phone, where he's like, and like when he's like, I actively felt like no, he was trying to comfort her. He's like, yes, I'm gonna be there, even though they both knew it was a lie.
it's interesting that you say that because I got an opposite feeling. I think the way that I viewed that scene was in the complete opposite direction, and that he was reaching out for the pure selfish motivation of him being saved. And when it'll be odd to say, but when he was saying that he'll be there soon, it was purely because he wanted to be removed from the situation he was in. So that kind of concludes in the end scene where he's lying in bed and he finally admits to himself with the nurse that she won't be there soon.
Yeah,
Like, do you follow what I'm saying?
yeah, I follow what you're saying, and
I just had a different point of view on
yeah,
that.
and I see like I think I believe that was the original motivation for the call,
Hmm.
but he also kind of gave it up right away. There was a couple deleted scenes. I'm not exactly sure where they fit in the film, and I think it could have added just a little bit more
Hmm.
to it. So I understand that you wouldn't have seen this,
Of course.
um, but I'll give you the context. So it was when he's at Coney Island and they're out. I think they were either scoring drugs or getting drugs, and he calls his mom, and she's having one of the freakouts,
Yeah.
and
Oh, that must have been why the phone was off its hook in that.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's probably exactly where it laid in. But and she's like, no, and she's begging him to come
Hmm.
because she's locked in the closet like she was at the beginning of the film, freaking out because the fridge, best movie monster by the way, is freaking out, and she's just begging him to come, and his response is not, can't. I've got other things to do. I've got too many other irons in the fire,
Yeah.
right? So and I mean, even without that scene, you see that in his character a lot, right? It's like, oh yeah, no, don't worry, mom. I'll come by,
Hmm.
right? Like, so I do think there was a lot of that selfishness, and that's why I took that last one as like I think that might have been his original motivation, but he didn't push it as soon as he heard her distress, and that's why I see that as that one moment where he might have tried to like showed caring.
Hmm. I wonder. I did with that character have that like you put your hand up and like you can't look when he was like shooting up in his like gangrenous arm.
Oh,
I was just like, no,
yep.
like I am gonna look away from this. That does that doesn't really fit into what you were saying.
No.
No. It was just like one kind of last little tidbit about Harry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and yeah, I definitely can see your perspective on that as well. It's just kind of I think a lot of the film is I think there's a surprising amount of the film that is kind of meant to be interpretable like
Well, yeah,
that.
especially like on your perception of the characters,
Yeah.
like the way that it was written and shot, the way that you felt about the characters would completely taint like an entire situation or scene
Hmm.
within that film. So that the one that we just discussed about that final phone call would be a great example of.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I
Um
just before it leaves my head, I did remember seeing something in this that made me wonder if Suicide Squad had a callback to Requiem. So when Harry and Marion were laying on the ground, like head next to each other, and their bodies were pointed out the other way,
Mm,
they were surrounded by a circle of torn magazines and like
yeah.
cutouts
Hmm.
in such a way, and they were like having a moment. And then it,
Yeah,
it
I've tried to forget Suicide Squad. I know exactly the scene you're talking about now.
yeah, with Joker
Yeah, and hard.
laid out. I mean, I think they also kind of went for a wings thing, but I just like I had a visual moment, and I'm like, are they did they call back to this? I'd have to
Yeah,
watch it again, but
but then you'd have to watch it again.
I didn't mind it.
No?
Get your popcorn and shove it in your face. We're gonna watch some
Oh,
guys punch each other. And Harley Quinn backflip,
was the
and
best part of the film.
I liked Diablo.
We're talking about other movies. Um,
So Ellen,
it- yeah. Oh, wow. Um,
it was her acting and her monologues that tied this movie together for me.
mhm,
Uh, she even said that being in this film was like her best acting achievement.
yeah.
Her breakdown when she was on those uppers and she was talking to Harry at the table,
Mm.
just like it tore into me. Like there was something that it was pulling or scratching at me, and I was just so deeply uncomfortable with that entire situation because she sold it so well.
Do you know how well she sold it?
Mm.
So, in that same scene, you know how she kind of drifts out of frame? Yeah, that's because the cameraman was tearing up and couldn't see anymore.
Yeah, that definitely would have been me if I was filming that too. Just
Yeah. 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 Apparently, she did 3 different takes of that monologue,
mm.
and none of them were anywhere near the same. They were all very different interpretations of it. And yeah, apparently Aronofsky went to the cameraman to ream him out for losing the shot and just looks at him and just like tears pouring down, the viewfinders all fogged up. He had no idea he lost the shot. And that is one of those, as Bob Ross would say, one of those happy little accidents
Mm.
that just worked so well. It helped sell it. Like just the drop of music, that raw emotion, like just it was the I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that was the only case in the entire film where it was also a sincere call for help, a sincere scream
Mm.
for help, and it just tears at you. Like, yeah, it,
I can't think of anyone else who would have been able to do that part to that effectiveness.
yeah,
And to talk about selling breakdowns when after she had her like hyper drug induced refrigerator monster breakdown and just bolted out of the house and actually went on the subway,
yeah,
then went to the TV studio. Like that entire series of scenes during the winter period.
yeah.
Was that winter or was that still fall?
The subway, I think, like when she ran out of the house and stuff like that. That was the beginning of winter.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that was in winter. Because winter is when all shit goes through. Kind of the cutting point was her. What was the freak out in the apartment?
It was probably when she re-upped because the drugs weren't cutting it anymore. She
Yeah,
started mixing them. It's
yeah,
probably the end of fall. Her additional monologue with like all the studio people around her,
yeah,
and then the police officer comes. I was like, the best way to illustrate it is the majority of this movie. I didn't feel or care for like anyone. Maybe a little bit for Tyrone. He was endeared to me, but they weren't set up in such a way that I would care for them. But I had overflowing empathy and pity when she was having a breakdown in the TV studio there.
yeah.
And like
And
all these people standing there, they have no idea what to say.
yeah, you see that again, like the subway. It's the same thing. It's like they she came across as that crazy person you avoid on the subway,
Yeah.
and but I mean, seeing that fall there, right? It, it's it's interesting for a movie that's so much about suffering. Um, Apparently, the author said this a lot too. Like one of the biggest things that he finds people say to him is like, no, it just kind of brings compassion
Mm,
because now you have a perspective that you wouldn't have had before. So yeah, she's not just that crazy person. We see exactly why she's that crazy person. What happened, right? And it's it's powerful. Apparently, like I think I can't remember. I think it was just before that scene. Like apparently, like the author was actually reading her passages from the book, like
mm,
about that part as well. Um, One of the things that Ellen said about this too was 'cause she's done stage acting and such as well. And she talks
mm,
about sometimes you get on stage and you'll get that like one moment that you feel like you are the character, right?
mm.
And she said like that happened to her like 6 times while filming this, and like those monologues were it, and I completely believed it. Like she sold it so well. I think just kind of going on that the feeling for the characters. I think it's interesting because at the beginning of the film, I kind of felt a bit for Marion as well,
Mm.
but I think I think
She,
it's obfuscated some. Like they almost sold it as she was going to be brought down by Leto's character, and doesn't and a bit further, and you go like, oh no, this is her own doing. It's not him dragging her down or anything like that.
well, she definitely uh, just fully enabled Leto's character, opposed to being pulled down.
Yeah.
Um, to start, my original, what was it, the roof scene?
Hmm.
Was that the first scene with her? Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, I think so.
My original impression of her was a spoiled parents girl who was playing at being rebellious,
Yeah.
but that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah.
Like, she was definitely just as much into the drugs. She was just as much not a good person
Yeah. Like,
with no redeemable qualities per se
um,
that they elaborated.
well, and it's her fall is is very intriguing to me.
Mm,
Like, I mean, her ending is kind of one of those iconic scenes. As disturbing as it is, it's 100% iconic. And like on the one hand, you're going, you're so addicted that you're throwing yourself into this situation. But then at the same time, at the very beginning, she's talking about her psychologist and how she was like threading the line with that, so he wouldn't tell her parents anything, and just following that arc to you know not going to like what I have to do to get the money. I It's disturbing that she did that. At the same time, it didn't seem. I don't know. It's interesting because she seemed like she'd be the type to be all too willing to do that until she actually did it. If that makes sense.
I guess it didn't have the same impact to me. What? Because when she hooked up with the psychologist to get the, was it the $2,000?
Yeah.
I think it was 2,000. There was a small line in there about her not having a problem with the lights before or some such like that.
Yeah.
That wasn't, so that was definitely not the first time that she had prostituted herself out for money to this guy.
Yeah.
So there was a long-standing history. If we were to look at, not from a drug point of view, but if you were to look at, I mean, she definitely had multiple falls, just like multiple descents, just like everyone else
Yeah.
in this film. But if we were to look at it from like the sexual side,
Yeah.
it definitely started out small and ended up ramping up just like everything else.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any investment in that side of it. So
Yeah.
though that ending scene with like all the businessmen and stuff would have been disturbing for many, I was already well disturbed about her character from the whole like emotional and structural loss she had experienced.
Yeah.
So I guess it just didn't impact me in the same way. Mind you, it did lead to that bathtub scene. Oh, just so good. I know you know this. Shot for shot recreation of a scene from Perfect Blue, and apparently the director had purchased the live action film rights of Perfect Blue just so he could use that scene.
Yep.
It's just so good. As far as it's hard to give this film a normal structure
Yeah.
because it's just all like from 0 to 60 and suffering and then nothing.
Yeah.
But for me, her character's climax would have been that scene.
Yes.
If I mean climax wouldn't be the appropriate term, because is not this story is just not like standardized story structure in that way.
I think climax would still be the appropriate term there.
Okay.
Because, yeah, because the climax was her doing that, like her with Big Tim, right? Then to the bathroom scene
Hmm.
with that again iconic bathroom scene, and that's where she's done. Everything else after that was because the denouement, right? It's just like, yep, this is her life now. She's getting ready and having the talk with um with Harry on the phone and such like that. It's like she's there. So yeah, no, that would be, yeah, I'd agree. That's a climax of her arc.
Okay.
Um, and I think the big thing with that scene, I mean, I think it's iconic because sex being evil in American media,
I
that
guess.
type of thing, and it's the it's not just what's happening to her in that scene, right? It's the fact that it's happening to her while cut with this, you know, ravenous crowd, while cut with, everything happening with Sarah and Harry and such as well.
Ooh, another
That
perspective. You just kind of enlightened me to that. I'll throw it out there. So originally, she was hooking up with the psychologist, I imagine, related to some money, maybe gifts, not telling her parents, and then eventually she does it directly for money,
yeah,
so she can get drugs.
yeah,
And then, um, she hooks up with what's his name, Big Tim.
Big Tim, yeah,
Big Tim, just straight up for drugs.
yeah,
So that's the way that those encounters were increasing in intensity.
yeah,
So it was no longer auxiliary. She was no longer doing it for herself as a whole. She was doing it straight up just to get effects.
yeah. And I guess that could actually, as you enlighten me a little bit with her arc there, um, I think that actually might be part of it too, and why you have that turn in that disgust, which again felt that little bit odd to me at the time, as we just mentioned. But I think she was using him as a sugar daddy. And I mean, even though you don't see anything before that scene, like there's definitely the "oh, you're jealous"
Yeah.
and such. Like we know, but because they were successful selling drugs, she didn't need to call him anymore.
Hmm.
So she was over that, and then had to go back to it again.
Well, yeah. Originally,
So it was almost like a relapse.
she was using it to obtain some type of control or power over her life,
Yeah,
and then eventually, it ended up just being a utility to get drugs. So it was no longer
almost like she
effective.
started as a rebellious girl.
Yeah, yeah. And again, like Connolly killed it as well. The scene that sealed it for me in her her acting in this film was when she was staring in the mirror,
Mm,
and I think like she just had a raw top on or some such,
yeah,
and she was staring and she looked unconfident, she looked tired, and then she did some drugs and like you could tell she felt shiny
yeah,
would be a term that's often used. Like you could tell she gained like that drug fueled like confidence in herself, something maybe even a little bit more like ethereal
mm,
inside her head.
yeah,
Like all of a sudden she was stretching in a way, she was broad, like open shouldered instead of hunched over.
yeah,
um, and she didn't even say anything.
yeah.
Like it was all physical acting and it was just spot on.
And I loved that scene. Um, not directly with Connolly there, but just because it sparked. I really liked how they
Juxtaposed.
juxtaposed her and Sarah
Hey, wait a minute,
there.
that's my shtick.
Yeah, I
I'm the
know.
one who mispronounces words.
No, no, no. Getting names confused, like calling judges dreads, that's a little bit further than a mispronunciation, my friend. The juxtaposition of her and Sarah there kind of caught my eye 'cause it's like that. It obviously Sarah was having her body issues,
Hmm.
right? 'Cause she can't fit in that dress anymore. Cut to Jennifer Connelly standing in a mirror, which is exactly what I would expect for a PSA for someone having body issues.
I'm pretty sure I remember something very similar in like a one of them late
Very special episode.
90s, early 2000s Canadian PSAs about body issues.
Yeah.
I mean, with pants on.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah, she sold it completely. I love Jennifer Connelly. She's amazing.
I could have swore that she had been in more stuff that I had seen. Uh, but she definitely was in one of the greatest movies of all time, The Rocketeer. This is such an all-star cast across the board, though, eh?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because like I don't think it was an all-star cast necessarily at the time.
Hmm, you are
I think,
right.
sorry, with the exception of Ellen and Jennifer. Like, I mean, Ellen's from The Exorcist, right? Jennifer Connelly had, of course, had like Labyrinth and such under her belt at that point. But I feel like, I mean, again, Marlon Wayans was just a comedy actor, and I really think it's the first thing I've really seen Jared Leto in. I can't remember. I don't think he was in much prior to that.
Leto?
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess yeah. If you
American
think,
Psycho?
is that before that though?
I'm not great for movies and times.
Same year.
I know that
Yeah, they came out at the same time.
I want to throw a little bit more love Marlon Wayans way.
Mm,
Though his character wasn't in the movie as complex as the others.
yeah.
He sold to me the perspective of a good kid who got into and was
Yes.
getting in over his head. It was probably almost even a good thing for his character that was it the Italians shot up
Yeah.
that limo
Yeah.
as he was about to go to the big times, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And that would have been a point of no return for his character.
Mm,
If he had gone that way, there would have been no redeeming arc in the end.
yeah.
I guess you're right though, to kind of go back to what we were talking about. I mean, still pretty decent cast, huge cast now.
Mm,
The thing that I like about it is even watching it nowadays, knowing like all these roles under their belts and the things that they've been in even recently,
yeah.
the way that it was shot, filmed, acted, the score, everything. And this is how it should be. The actor's previous roles and reputation did not taint the movie negative or positively at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
It had no impact. It was just the characters, the acting,
Yeah.
and they all represented them so well.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like you weren't watching Jennifer Connelly, you were watching Marion.
Hmm.
And I mean, if any of them was going to pull me out, it would have been Marlon Wayans because, as you said, he's known for the comedies and kind of the crappy parody comedies.
Well, I mean, those are supposed to be funny. There's people who
Oh yeah.
like them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just because you have hyper complex tastes, filmolier, as they would say.
I loved Scary Movie.
I
It's
actually
just
did not like it at all.
it just it they became very derivative.
So overall, everything about this movie was the perfect little puzzle piece that fit together so that when I turned it off, I mentioned before I had a little depressive episode. had to go for a walk, and I like instantly started questioning the things I have, relationships I've built, the the way that I've treated and been treated by partners in the
Yeah.
past, the friends I've lost. And yeah, went for a walk. I settled down, played a bit of a game, had a beer, and then I was finally like, okay, mostly recovered from what just happened to me.
So I alluded to this before, and I figure I'll talk about it a little bit more now. So as I said, I have the director's comp, the DVDs, so I actually had the benefit of looking at special features, which you normally don't have. And one of the special features was Ellen basically interviewing Selby, the author.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, it was a 20-minute vignette essentially, and it's so the author has had a very, very rough life. He, had is genetically predisposed to rage and had brain damage for being born with the umbilical cord around his neck, and
Hmm.
was told, had a bunch of ribs removed, right? Fought in World War II, had asthma so bad that he he was at the doctor's. The doctor didn't even come in the room and basically says like, "Yeah, you're not living."
Hmm.
Like when he was like 28, and and when that happened, there was a spiritual awakening for him. He had that moment that you actually just kind of talked about, the what am I doing in life? What am I going to have? And he says he self professes to be a person with no skill, no
Hmm.
talent. He's nothing exceptional, and he just started writing, right? And got into this writing, and his books are all dark and suffering. I haven't read any of them. This is, as I understand, his body of work, and his take on suffering in particular is actually absolutely fascinating to me. His view of it is it's not the suffering, or rather, suffering is completely avoidable. Pain isn't, but suffering is,
Okay.
right? You're gonna feel pain, and where the suffering comes from is the getting lost in the drugs, the getting lost in the TV, the not stopping and going, yes, this hurts. Yes, this sucks. Now let's move on. And so I think that because I had the same thing, every time I watch a movie, I stop and go, I stop and kind of have that contemplative moment. And I really think that's what he's trying to go for. You show the suffering, and I mean, it's one of those things where if you just stop and acknowledge, like, think about it. If Sarah just acknowledged that she was lonely and went outside with the other women, she would have avoided all of this. I mean, you see that she had friends, but she couldn't express with or deal with the fact that she was feeling this pain from, her deadbeat son who keeps stealing her TV to, you know, being the widow, and all she needed to do was go out and talk to them. I mean, she had friends. Look how excited all of them were when she was filling out her application to get on TV. To them crying for her at the end of the film when they see how gone she was. And I think that's why I think the film is designed to invoke those feelings, to make you go and think
Hmm.
about those things, because even it didn't need to expressly tell you to think about it, but you stop, you acknowledge, you be mindful of it, and then you can move on.
I guess structured that way, it makes like a lot of sense. Like knowing that perspective.
Hmm.
I mean, those two ladies should feel bad.
Hmm.
They're the two primary reasons why Sarah got into drugs in the first. They were the vehicles of that.
They, I mean,
She would have
Sarah's.
she would have found something to fall in it, be it some other addiction that she had, but her getting into uppers and downers and damaging weight loss routines were actually because of the suggestions of those two old women.
Well,
So I was
okay.
actually angry at them when I saw them crying. I'm like, to the point where I was like, how dare you cry for her? Because that's a large portion your fault.
I understand where you're coming from with that. I disagree with you.
Mm.
First of all, any type of get like, let's face it, there were a lot of fad diets,
Mm.
right? Like the idea of the half a grapefruit and an egg and such for breakfast. It's like, yeah, it's not actually a terrible breakfast unless you're used to eating a lot more,
Yeah.
like she was, right? Like it is actually fairly well balanced, but when you're in the mindset to just lose weight as opposed to change your lifestyle, that's how that goes.
Yep.
So and the one who suggested the doctor, and but a doctor said it. Doctors aren't wrong, right? Like it. So I f- I understand your anger there, but I don't think there was any maliciousness there. She's still the one who ended up like actively calling her doctor saying, "I think something's wrong." The doctor saying is like, "No, you've just finally gotten used to it." And her actively ignoring the doctors. That had nothing to do with her friends.
Mm.
And in fact, if she had listened to that, she might not have had the same
Mm-hmm.
issues, but instead she started doubling her own medication and ignoring that. So, while I agree, it's definitely not the pills and such. I mean, it's a big epidemic, and
Mm.
even though her reasons for this might have been to lose weight, I mean, people get that addiction for a lot of things that aren't selfish, for lack of better terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pain management stuff too. So, I think,
I think I derailed us.
mm,
To just get back on track. So knowing that about the original author
yeah,
and that perspective actually answers one of the questions I had. I guess some groundwork on this. This whole seasonal structure to filmmaking, you enlightened me to when we were talking about the tale of Princess Kaguya.
yeah,
So I was sitting here, it started at summer, and I knew for a fact the type of story that would occur going through fall and into winter.
yeah,
But there was no spring.
yeah,
There was no new growth. There was no rebirth. There was no birds chirping.
yeah,
And knowing the author's perspective makes me understand why there's no spring. Though, from a standard story perspective, I still have that craving for one,
yeah,
even though I really only kind of want it for Sarah a bit and mostly Tyrone.
yeah, yeah. And you, yeah, I kind of figured that you would have that thought as well. I mean, I obviously noted the seasons and such as well because we literally talked about that on our last media club. Was it our last media club?
No,
No, the one before that.
couple.
Yeah, and I I think that's probably a big reason why you actually don't get a spring set because like half the characters, well, again, Word of God straight up says only one of them even has a chance at spring. The damage to Sarah is permanent, like that speed freak mental damage. There's nothing you can do to change that. I mean, obviously, you know, Jared Leto or Harry has a very clear permanent effect there.
Literally losing an arm.
Literally losing an arm. Uh, and Marion has herself so deep in that she's created her own negative feedback loop, right? She's, you know, she went into the prostitution so she can have the drugs to forget her life. That's now happening for the prostitution. And
I mean, she technically could have. I mean, it would have to be its own whole movie.
yeah,
There could be a redemption arc there, but she would have to actually hit rock bottom
yeah,
so that she could completely reinvent and change her life from the ground
yeah,
up. But I mean, Tyrone, you could see that spark of it in him.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I was actually just about to say that. I think you have that spark
Mm,
of it there. So again, you don't need to have the spring act because we know what because you can see what's happening from that,
hmm
right? Like it,
Well, it's nice not to have that conclusion too. Uh,
yeah,
as lazy as I can be when it comes to film watching sometimes, and I just want things spelled out for me.
yeah,
It is nice to have that thought and not have that resolution.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's just a hallmark of good writing and filmmaking where you don't have to have everything tied up in a nice little bow,
Yeah.
where things can be left to interpretation.
Yeah. And think of it from an artistic standpoint too. If you had that spring scene, would you have had to go for that walk?
Oh, probably. I was messed up halfway through.
Right. But like,
I know what you're saying, though. The outcome would have been different in the end. I wouldn't have been thinking about it when I woke up this morning.
yeah, just because we've just mentioned the end of Tyrone there, that guard that was yelling at him, that's the author.
Oh,
That's the person who wrote the book.
oh, cool.
Yeah.
This little cameo.
Yeah. Um, I want to kind of touch just into a few of the things that they did for realism in the film.
Hmm.
Just kind of some of the stuff that they did to give realism to the film. Like, Jared Leto wasn't the only one who did that method acting.
Hmm.
Jennifer Connelly actually did very similar. She basically rented an apartment in the same area, basically set up as it was in the film to, and I think her father is actually a fashion designer and actually just threw herself into doing that exact
Hmm.
same types of thing. Aronofsky actually told them, it's like, nope, no sex, no sugar for a month beforehand, so they can try to have people have everyone there feel what that craving could be like,
Hmm.
which is just fascinating to me doing that. And apparently, like, the scene where they go to try to get the drugs when they're like at the end of during the drought, that was it was actually a bunch of homeless people, and there were actually people shooting up there
Oh, jeez.
while doing that. They knew what they wanted to do, and were and had no problems going through with that. Other kind of fun facts is kind of just more wrap up thing. So stop me if you feel anything you want to talk about from it. One of the cool things for Aronofsky, because this is his second feature film,
Hmm.
and apparently he got into filmmaking by reading one of Selby's other books.
Oh,
At Last Exit to Brooklyn, I think is what it was called.
that
That's
would be
actually what made him get into film. Period. He's like, I want to tell stories.
that'd be really rewarding for him.
Yeah, you did actually have to fight to not have to edit the film because they were going to give it like an NC-17, which is above a rated R. Would have made it so it couldn't have been anywhere. And they basically thought it's like, there's literally nothing you can cut out of this film. It is all that important. Managed to get that through, which is awesome. Yeah, there's kind of a few things, and of course the main music from Requiem. Basically, I think it was the same song throughout the entire thing. That the string quartet.
Well, we've said this like a bunch of times. Like I didn't really notice the music explicitly, and that's a good thing.
I am honestly surprised you didn't notice. Like, yes, it is a fantastic. It is definitely a good thing. The music is done very well in this. Again, cuts out when you're hearing Sarah's monologues. So good. That song is heard literally everywhere nowadays. It is your dramatic trailer music.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the way they did it was like, it starts playing with like the first time you hear the when it starts, you actually hear the tap tap tap
Mm.
that a conductor would do, and you hear the string instruments tuning, and they basically just kind of built it and built it throughout the entire piece. So the music was meant to be just as much of a character in a way,
Mm.
and so you get to that frantic panic at the end when literally everything's gone gone to hell. So it's a good thing that you didn't hear the music, because I honestly half thought it'd be one of those things that would pull you out of the film for a second.
No, it's well, I mean, when it's not just slapdash thrown on there, when
Yeah.
there's thought and forethought and it matches it well,
Yeah.
you shouldn't notice it. It should
Yeah.
just enhance the scene that you're
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah.
And like when I'm sitting down, I'm not the only time I'm explicitly paying attention for the score of a film is when they go, this is so and so orchestra, like that's a selling feature of the film.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, if you remember back in the 2000s where films were just a vehicle for soundtracks.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I should clarify. Like, I didn't think it would pull you out of the film because it didn't work with the film.
Mm.
I honestly thought it might have pulled you out for a second because it's that song that you hear in all of the trailers and
Oh,
dramatic commercial. That's what I thought was. That's what I was slightly afraid of. So I'm glad to hear that that didn't happen for you. So
there
yeah,
was nothing that pulled me out of the film, but the film itself made me want to leave the room
yeah,
because I was so profoundly uncomfortable.
yeah,
Um, but I at no point did I stay just because we were gonna talk about this film and I should watch the whole thing.
yeah,
I was definitely interested in what was going on. If the acting wasn't so good, I may not have held on.
yeah,
I probably would have been. I wouldn't have turned it off because it was a bad movie. I would have turned it off because I was that uncomfortable.
yeah,
It's just like I can't watch, torture porn.
yeah,
It's like really not for me.
yeah. So you're saying I should throw Hostel on the list?
I
No, it, it's it's a big thing because it's an art form to make something that makes you feel so uncomfortable, but
mm.
at the same time, this is something that you should watch. And again, just the cast overall, like amazing. It's a list of actors and films that's like you don't even need to go through anything. I'm surprised you didn't mention one character, Shooter McGavin.
Oh no, I actually have a note for him. He was the perfectly cast to be that like self-help
Yeah,
guru, like 1-800 number.
yeah,
I mean, apparently a lot of that was just like off the dome, like off the top of his head, just
yeah.
improvising. I mean, Shooter is best, but I mean, he doesn't need to be redeemed, so I didn't
Yeah,
feel like I needed to talk about
yeah, no.
him.
I just mentioned because again, I know we're wrapping up. I figured you would. I wasn't sure if he'd come up or not, but again, just the cast overall, absolutely amazing. Aronofsky's a fantastic director. Just watch his stuff. I can't speak to the writer much. I haven't read any of his books. I didn't even realize this was based off a book until I was researching it for this.
See,
Um,
now, I know that this is one of your favorite movies, but this
yeah,
firmly falls in the category for me of movie that I recognize as a great,
yeah,
but I actually just don't like.
yeah,
But it's purely because of the way that the film made me feel. So it accomplished what it set out to do, which is what makes it great.
yeah. As opposed to some other films that we
Yes,
know are great, but it's just like, oh, do I have to?
we do have to, and we're gonna
I know.
in the future. Shalalala.
Yeah. As I said, but in saying it's one of those movies that I strongly believe everyone should watch. It's an absolutely amazing film. It's unlike some other films that we won't name at this point.
Shalalala.
It's yeah, it's engaging. You're not bored during it. As I said, it's one of my favorite films, but it's not like I'm trying to think of another film. It's not like Four Brothers, which I would just drop everything and watch it if it was on.
Mm-hmm.
This is a movie that I know I'm going to get a lot out of. I'm not going to throw it in randomly on weekends.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. So
So if you were to rate this movie, what kind of rating would you provide it?
hmm.
I would I would give this film a 3 out of 5 manic episodes and 3 out of 5 depressive episodes.
Oh.
That one's for you, Sin.
Oh. Yeah, I would give this. I'd give this actually 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5 fixes.
All right. So then I wonder what's lacking in your life that you have to use this film to fill that void.
Not enough Beauty and the Beast. um, Thanks again for joining us tonight. Join us next week as we continue discussing Carol in Tuesday on the Second Wall. After that, in 2 weeks, we'll be back with the Losers on the Media Club. Make sure to follow us on your platform of choice. Again, all available at beautyandthebeast.com, so you don't miss a discussion. And please share us out to anyone you think might need a media discussion fix themselves.
Later.